Now, you said you love a good fight. What's gone wrong with the Australian Defence Force in their battle readiness?
Sure, okay, so, and I want to preface this, I'm not criticising the soldiers, sailors and airmen and women. They do a very good job. They're patriotic, they are well trained, and the battlefield success, for instance, in Afghanistan shows what our military can do.
I want to ask you on that, are they patriotic? Because we just recently saw a tweet from a sailor based in Cairns who essentially spat on the flag and on all Australian and military traditions.
Yeah, okay, so this is a real shame, and it's going to highlight the problem with our politically correct hierarchy, and it shows very clearly where political correctness leads. So, and I want to make it clear, the vast majority of members of the Australian Defence Force do a good job and do it very well.
Agreed.
But we have significant problems coming in. So, for instance, we now have a clique of homosexual officers in the military pulling strings to get policies changed their way. That's undisputed. I've got email records where the Australian Defence Force approached this organisation, DEFCLIS, to ask for their advice on media statements in relation to me. They're not part of, that organisation is not part of Defence. It has no role to play in providing media advice. We've now got this sailor. My understanding is that she was recruited through the Defence New Indigenous Recruitment Program, stating with a picture of her in uniform on her Facebook page that she would burn and spit on the Australian flag. This undermines the cohesion that is necessary to defend Australia in a fight.
What do you think the consequences should be for a defence member publicly in uniform stating that they would burn and spit on the flag?
Well, I think they should be charged with military offences, as I was, but they would be found guilty because they were actually in uniform making that statement. And then they should be removed from service. You can't have people in the military threatening to burn the Australian flag. It just doesn't work. Now, so Defence has been so focused on these politically correct goals and agendas, it's lost any understanding of what it's there for. So we won all the fights in Afghanistan, we lost the war. We won all the fights in Iraq, we lost the war. Now, it's not just the Australian Defence Force that can take the blame, I guess, for that, because we're a coalition with other partners, but we don't have any strategy in place to win these wars anymore, and Defence is focused on things like female recruitment, sex change operations, Indigenous recruitment. Not that I'm saying females and Indigenous people shouldn't be able to join the Defence Force, but when you prioritise their recruitment over military capability, the whole nation suffers. And I'll give you a very clear example. The Chief of Army gave a speech in August last year, and in that speech he admitted that for the last 10 to 15 years, Defence has not been able to recruit enough people, has not met its targets. Now, over the last 10 to 15 years, recruitment has become more and more focused on recruiting females and become more and more focused on advertising to people on the basis of, instead of them getting them to serve Australia as patriotic citizens, it's about what can Defence give you. So it fundamentally twists the understanding of why you're in the military. But especially over the last couple of years, Defence has now got quotas for 25% women in the Army in recruitments. The Chief of Army stated that the plan to increase female recruitment is actually going to result in less women in the Army. So not only for the last 10 to 15 years have we been failing to recruit properly, the new focus on female recruitment is making the system worse. And I've received feedback from people involved in recruitment that if they've got a young, fit male wanting to join up and the spot is slated for a woman, they are not allowed to enlist them.
So if they've got enough men, but not enough soldiers, and if there's no women applying, that's it, we don't get any more soldiers.
The spot is vacant, is my understanding.
Even if there was a male soldier in waiting?
That's what I've been told by recruiters, but the Chief of Army made it very clear that the focus on female recruitment was not only resulting in less women in the military, the way it's going, but in the context of 10 to 15 years of under-recruitment, and you bring in a program to increase female recruitment that fails spectacularly, there's only one conclusion, is overall recruitment is even worse than before.
Do you think it's coincidental, or do you think it's consequential that overall recruitment is down while the focus has gone towards minorities?
Well, I think it's consequential. It's not coincidental. I mean, if you say we need to recruit this many people every year, and we're now going to say 25% of that is for females, and you can only get that much, then you've got a big gap. It's called a capability gap. And defence is building its own capability gap with its manpower by focusing on women. And it just makes no sense. Women don't want to join the Australian Defence Force in anywhere near the same numbers as young, fit Australian blokes. Defence is something blokes want to do. It is just not in the female nature. Some of them do, but in general, females just aren't as interested. Blokes are. Why would you say we're going to limit the amount of people who are interested in defence to go after a segment of the population who in general just aren't interested? And furthermore, it makes no sense because, and this is not a statement of derision towards women, it is a fact. Women are not as strong as men. And when women can play first grade rugby league to the same standard as a men's team, I'll change my view on this. But until that happens...
That makes sense.
We've got a very clear fact. Men are stronger than women. And if they can't compete on the sporting
That's
field...
one of those politically incorrect charge statements, which is nonetheless stating the obvious.
It is stating the obvious. But this is the point. If men and women can't compete on the sporting field, which is just a game, why on earth would you want men and women to compete on the battlefield, which is not a game? And at the end of it, the winner lives and the loser dies.
How do you accommodate that view in light of the success of the integration of the Israeli Defence Force?
Sure. Well, look, I think it's a good question. And the fact is, the Israeli Defence Force is in a very, very different situation to the Australian Defence Force. We are not a nation facing an existential threat every single day. And sure, if Australia was facing that threat, and we needed to put women in frontline combat roles to face it, then I think there would be justification for doing so. But we don't face that threat today, and so there is no reason for our society to ask our mothers, wives, daughters and sisters to serve in a frontline combat role when there's no need for it to happen.
Now tell me about, as a experienced 3 times deployed intelligence officer, tell me about the intelligence our army has regarding the enemy. Sure.
So my job as an intelligence officer is to understand the enemy and provide advice to the commander. Now, throughout my whole entire time in my career as an intelligence officer, Defence has shown no interest whatsoever in understanding Islam. And Islam is the ideology that drives our battlefield enemy today. It is simply ridiculous.
Again, stating the obvious.
Again, stating the obvious. And look, it is true to say that some of the enemy we fight, they're not just motivated by Islam. That is true. For instance, in Afghanistan, you've got tribal influences, you've got drug influences, you've got all these other influences as well. But to say that Islam is not part of it is simply crazy. And I would argue very strongly that it is the largest part of it. I mean, when people quote from the Quran and explain why they're killing Western captives or they're fighting war against Western nations in Afghanistan, and they quote from the Quran to justify their position, we're really stupid if we don't listen to it. And that's what we're doing.
What's the solution? What is to be understood? What should be... Tell me what is in the manual, how much information actually is there about Islam, and tell me what's missing. Sure.
Well, there is no manual on Islam. And that's the case. Next time a government minister comes out after a terrorist attack and says this has got nothing to do with Islam, you should ask for the assessments that has been given to government that justifies a statement that this has got nothing to do with Islam. Ask for the assessment. I can tell you there is none. There is no assessment on it. Defence has got a glossy Wikipedia guide to religious belief, and it's got about 2 pages on Islam, and it says basically there are 5 pillars. It's Wikipedia, and it also says that all Muslims seek to emulate Muhammad's example and they think he's perfect. That 2 pages doesn't say one single thing about what Muhammad did or said while he was alive. And of course, any student of military history knows that Muhammad was one of the great military commanders in world history. I mean, he built an army and conquered large parts of the world. He was a military commander. And our own military document on Islam doesn't even mention that fact at all.
Seems like a bit of an oversight if you're trying to honestly understand your enemy.
They don't want to honestly understand the enemy. And this comes back to political correctness. In a politically correct world, you're not allowed to discuss religion, because religion is something that people get offended by and they get upset about. And so a politically correct world says, well, look, we just won't discuss religion and we'll just accept that all religions are fine and good. And that leads into our inability to dissect and understand and engage with Islam in the military. We actually do Muhammad a great injustice by pretending that he was this nice guy who, was this peaceful Islamic hippie version of Jesus Christ, I guess, which just doesn't make sense. He was a military commander. We do him a great injustice by failing to recognise that.